Hello, everybody. My name's Tom. Back talking about F1 Fantasy, and for the first time ever, I'm not talking about F1 Fantasy by myself. I have a special guest with me today. It is none other than Rob from F1 Fantasy Hub. If you'd like to say hello, Rob, to all the viewers.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Tom. I feel honored to be a special guest of the channel, and I'm really
The
looking
very
forward
first
to.
guest.
Yeah, so it'll be good. I'm really looking forward to discussing F1 fantasy. I'm sure we've got quite a few things to go through.
Yep, we're gonna have a big discussion. I've got lots of questions all lined up for Rob. We're gonna grill Rob and kind of see where we go with that. We've also got a quiz coming up a bit later. If you, the viewers, want to take part in that as well, feel free because as the questions are read out, they'll come up on screen. Feel free to pause the video and try not to cheat. But yeah, put your answers in the comments. See how many you get. See if you can beat Rob a bit later on. But yeah, we're just going to kind of open up with a kind of a general discussion. We know, I'm sure most of you guys will kind of know Rob already because he's probably one of the biggest, if not like the biggest Twitter F1 fantasy account out there. I would say he got about 7,000 followers or something like that. That started about 2.5 seasons ago, and then started up on YouTube, building on your kind of fan base about a year and a half ago. So, how's all that been kind of going for you?
Yeah, no, it's been good. I know we've talked about it a little bit in the past, and I think you were the very first person I reached out to when I wanted to create a YouTube channel. So I think it should go without saying that you are the OG F1 Fantasy YouTube content creator. But obviously, it's been a lot of fun. I've had so many great experiences, like creating videos and engaging with the F1 Fantasy community. It's so interesting and engaged on Twitter and YouTube. And I'm sure you feel the
Yeah,
same way. And I
definitely.
think it's gone from strength to strength the last 2 years. So I'm sure it's going to continue that moving forward, right?
Yeah, for sure. And did you expect to have such engagement and interaction with so many people, like so many comments on your videos, interactions over on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it? Yeah, how's that gone with all the interaction? Is that something that you anticipated, or is that like a pleasant surprise kind of thing?
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasant surprise. I think it's just the number of people that seem so interested every week is what makes me want to come back for more and more for every race. And
Yep.
I think looking back at where it started in 2022 when I first got onto Twitter, and it was a very small community, a very engaged one, but a very small one at the time. And I wouldn't say it stacks up in terms of fantasy sports to some of the other big games out there, but I think the community has always been so engaged and so interested to seek nuggets of info from you, I, and plenty of the other creators out there. So I've really enjoyed it, and definitely didn't expect it to come along in so many strides as it has the last couple of seasons. I definitely think it's only going to get bigger and better moving forward.
Yep, excellent stuff. So the first kind of, I guess, topic, it's more of a topic than a question to kind of kick things off in earnest, is the way I kind of see or think about F1 fantasy or fantasy in general is, I guess I give it kind of a tagline of the never ending game. It kind of infiltrates, from my experience, it kind of infiltrates my thinking on a day to day basis. It doesn't even have to be a race week. I'm thinking about it a lot. Do you share those experiences? Do you find yourself, you're at work or you're lying in bed late at night and you're thinking about team selection? Like, is that something that really, it's not just me, right?
No, no, absolutely not. I definitely think it lives rent free in my head most days of the week. Certainly during a race week, I've done my best to, now that we're in the mid season break, try and disconnect from it as much as possible because there is just
Except
no
you're here.
urgency.
You're here now,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you can't
exactly,
disconnect.
exactly.
Reel them in.
And
Okay.
yeah, and so I find that, I'm not deleting Twitter off my phone or anything like that, but at least like limiting the amount of times I'm going back to check it, and where there isn't really any need to or engage
Yeah,
with people, it's a great opportunity for me to just take a step back for a week or two.
yeah,
I'm sure things will ramp up, in the next week or two as we get closer to the Netherlands, but it is certainly now that it's gotten bigger, and you and I are two of the biggest YouTube creators out there. There's almost a need or a requirement sometimes to be able to engage with the rest of the community, which is never a bad thing, but it certainly means that we are on or needing to be on the ball more often. So
yeah. There's a lot to
I'm
keep up
really
with.
relishing. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Keep up with all the news. So I'm really relishing, this break, albeit a small one, and I'll do the
Yeah.
same at the end of the year too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely got to avoid the burnout, which I think we both felt what was it, last end of November or so. But so moving on a little bit, and I guess kind of connected to what we were just discussing, were you able to tell us a bit more about your thought process behind building into a race week and going into the race weekend? Say we just come off the back of a race on a Sunday, and then we've got another race next weekend. What's kind of your process through that week leading up to the deadline?
Yeah, I think everyone's got a different one, and I'm fascinated to get like your opinion on how you do it, because it's probably different to mine. But I think as soon as I have the teams unlocked, I want to check my team value, because it gives you an idea of what you can afford for the next race. And I might fiddle with a couple of different early combinations, even though they may not be the final ones I land on. And then probably by about Thursday, once we've got as much news as possible, so the day before practice, I'll have maybe 3 or 4 different shortlisted in mind for me based on the number of trades I've got available and the budget I have. And then I think by the time we get to the end of FP2, so the end of Friday, I've probably got that down to about two different, maybe 3 different lineups. And I think for me, FP3 in particular is probably, to most of us, the most crucial practice session, would you say?
Did you say FP3?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to some extent it can vary, because quite often FP2 for me is important, because it can sometimes be a bit more reflective in terms of the timing of the day. It can kind of coincide at the same time of day as like qualifying the following day. But yeah, FP3 is still obviously very important, because it's kind of that final piece of information that we get as a manager to make our final decision. But yeah, it's yeah, for sure. Practice sessions are crucial.
100%. I find as well, like FP3 for me, living in the United States, for all of these European races, I will wake up at 8 o'clock, 8 in the morning, and then see the FP3 times, and then within the next 60 minutes kick off a deadline stream an hour before qualifying, and so I don't even get a chance.
Still rubbing the sleep from your eye, just like
I'm barely awake with one eye open. I'm checking the FP3 times to see if there's anything new, and then I jump straight onto a deadline stream. So going into the end of FP2, I pretty much have my mind made up more or less. It'll probably be 1 or 2 different lineups I roll with, and the FP3 verifies which one I ultimately go with, because I just don't have the time to watch an hour of free practice 3 and reassess. So I'll run straight into a deadline stream with very little FP3 information, and trust, of course, as we do every week, the F1 Fantasy Tools simulations, because they definitely give us a great idea of kind of where the points will shake out. Yeah,
definitely. And how about the final few minutes of locking in your team then? Do you let the stress get to you sometimes? Do you feel like maybe you make a last minute sort of snap decision, end up regretting it? Like, how do you cope with that pressure? Because there is that real pressure, not just because you're a content creator, just every fantasy manager out there probably feels that pressure. Maybe they see something last minute thing, someone tweets something out and it's, oh, that changes everything, and then you make a last minute decision. How do you cope with that pressure?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to those shortlisted lineups, because I think it was Imola where I went into the deadline stream without my mind made up on my team, and I made a snap decision to take a -10 with 5 minutes to go, and it just didn't pay off. Mm-hmm. And after that week, and I'm not usually someone that has a rash decision for their team at the very last minute. So that after that was pretty much the nail in the coffin. Like, Rob, you've got to have locked in ideas before we get to 5 minutes within the deadline, because I am probably not the best person to react at the last minute to news breaking. And I know you're probably much better at that, because I've seen you make last minute trades on your streams, and I've seen some of them pay off. I can't think of which ones they were, but I definitely recall one last year where you made one very close to the deadline.
Yeah, the one I remember from last year was going into Silverstone, where I put some trust in Piastri when the McLarens were looking good, also Albon. That was like quite a lot of discussion with the people in the chat at that time, and felt like quite a risky move, but it just kind of felt right. And I think talking it through on the stream and chatting to the people in the chat, it felt right and went for it. So sometimes the chat can be helpful, you know.
I just find the knee-jerk decisions for me don't pay off as much as I'd like, and so I try and avoid.
And also they just inflict more pain as well, because you look back at it and think, what was I thinking? Why did I do that last minute thing? At least if it goes wrong, and you've made a decision, like a calm like decision, you can't reach that decision and you're kind of happy with it going into the deadline, at least you can't really feel too bad about it. Anyway, so let's move on. Let's not think about the bad stuff just yet, because we'll get there. We'll get there. But can you tell me about any like major highlights that you've had for your F1 fantasy career? Any real good moments for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to think probably one of the highlights this year in particular, and it was certainly more luck based than it was pure strategy, because we know in F1 fantasy, as much as we want to put into the strategy and planning, luck or bad luck can ruin our decisions in a moment's notice. So I think for me, Monaco, where I completely avoided the Haas disqualifications and DNFs, was a pretty big moment for my team. I think I moved up about 4,000 into the top 3,000 for a short period of time, and then it's been in free fall since. But I think to not get hit with a single DNF that week, where people got, you know, Magnussen, Hulkenberg, the Red Bull constructor with Perez, and then I think Verstappen qualified well out of his usual starting position as well, meant rolling with McLaren Ferrari that weekend made a huge difference for my team.
That was a great result that weekend, wasn't it, for the Ferraris and McLarens?
Yeah. Ferrari has not really been anywhere near relevant lately, but I think that was a great result for Charles. And I think last year, I'm trying to remember, the 3X probably, the 3X DRS boost in Austria last year was probably the other one for me, where when we all had Red Bull, Aston Martin triple up, and having Perez, Max Verstappen in the 3 and the 2X, I think scored most people over 500 points. So
one of the biggest scores I can remember, like ever.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
I think that the bad outweighs the good, and there's a few violins which you've obviously coined that have definitely decimated my team the last couple of seasons.
Well, let's not wait any longer then. Let's hear what are these violin moments, and I'm sure I can share in some of the pain, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers can as well. And what are the kind of your lowest moments in fantasy?
I think you and I are probably on par for most of these bad moments. And if we want to start more recently, you'd have to say Belgium, right? Because you and I both had George Russell, and I think the team I had was on for a score of 220 or so points. But then with the disqualification, it kind of ruined us entirely, didn't it? Yeah,
I think we lost best part of 100 points, and not just points, like a big chunk of budget increase as well. So a real low moment there. And any other low moments, or are you sticking with that one?
Yeah, that's definitely the more recent one. I think the other standout again was another Mercedes disqualification last year in Austin, where I had Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc and the Mercedes constructor. So that was a triple whammy. That on a limitless weekend in particular was absolutely devastating. And I know you had the 3X chip, so you weren't exactly out of the woods.
I think the limitless users that weekend were hit a bit harder, to be fair, but I did use the 3X that weekend. I put the 3X on Verstappen, so at least I didn't put it on Hamilton, but I put the 2 times on Hamilton. And, when I went to bed that night, Hamilton was sat there on like 80 points or something. It was like 40 odd points, doubled obviously. And then I woke up in the morning, thought, let's check the rank, see where we're at. And sure enough, he was on the -8. And I was just like, I can still remember it very vividly. Sat down in my living room, pinged the phone open, and I was just lost for words, absolutely lost for words at 7 a.m. in the morning. I was just like, this is too much.
I can distinctly remember where I was in Austin at the time, because I was at the race there, and then again I was in transit, I think last week or the other week, when Russell's disqualification was announced, and I just remember like standing in public, going stone cold quiet, and people must have been looking at me going, what's this guy about? So they're probably the 2 standouts. I think not a violin moment per se, but another one that was quite pivotal in this season, I think, was the limitless use between China and Miami, because I think, as you and I have talked about to some length, China was probably coming with some risk of using such a powerful chip, but if I'm not mistaken, you used it there and it paid off handsomely, and then using it in Miami, which I did, was still successful to some degree, but I think you were down, or I was down about 100 points or so across both weekends, and that's, a pretty substantial difference
Yeah,
in
and I
rank as
think
well.
I don't know exactly what the difference is between our teams at the moment, but I think it's within that sort of 100 point range, and so yeah, you
Mm.
could argue that limitless decision is actually what's kind of separating you from,
Yeah,
3 or 4 thousand places or so.
exactly.
Obviously, there's other factors and other things that have happened since then,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I do think that, yeah, I wouldn't say it's, yeah, definitely not a violent moment, but certainly a slight pivotal moment now, I'd
Yeah.
say perhaps. Um,
Yeah, no, I think on the violins, just quickly, I love that it's become part of the F1 fantasy lore because I can't remember what race it was last season where you introduced it,
I
but
think it was Kota. I think it was after
oh, it
Kota
was.
because there was so much. Everyone was feeling such devastation. I was like, "There's only one thing for this. It's we got to play the violin for these poor people."
And it's now become, synonymous with a bad weekend in F1 fantasy that it is, quite iconic. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as well, just to sort of touching again on the violin moments, like I think all you can really do, like looking back on it, and as soon as you possibly can after you had these moments, is to kind of laugh it off, because you can really wallow in your own misery, and yeah, I think it is important as a manager to kind of try and sort of offload that, clear your head a bit, get going for the next race. We've both suffered in Spa. We've had our moment of down in the dumps, and I think it's important to just kind of, yep, we'll laugh about this soon enough, and then we're going to look on ahead for Zandvoort and so on and so forth. So I think all the managers out there, yeah, if this happens to you, which it's going to happen because a lot of it does come down to some pot luck occasionally. Yeah, my advice would certainly be to shrug it off and have a laugh, because what else can you do? Right. So how is your, I suppose on the back of talking about how Spa went, how is your season in general going at the moment? Um,
It's yeah, it's been a bit mixed if I'm being completely honest. I think, since that moment in Imola I was talking about before where I kind of wanted to avoid those snap decisions, I'd say every decision I've made this season since then has probably been for my team the best one. I haven't made anything rash. But it just how fantasy is, luck plays such a big part, and I'm currently at around, I think, 9,500 in the world, which is certainly not where I expected to be at the mid-season break. I kind of set out to crack, the top 1,000, 2,000 at the start of the year, and it's not out of reach, but it's certainly harder, being on the back foot a little bit.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's those weeks, that we've talked about that can really kind of throw a spanner in the works, right?
Yeah, definitely, and I think it's important to remember as well, particularly last season. Maybe it was exaggerated a bit of the whole ranks for the first half of the season. I think you and I and many managers were much worse ranks than we are currently. I think a lot of that was to do with the template of the Aston Martins and Red Bull. So everyone, the top 200,000 teams pretty much were kind of just the same.
Yeah.
But there is still a good amount of racing left to go. Well, we are over halfway through the season, but I think there's still a good amount to go. I think you could definitely, if you have a good run, you could for sure break that top 1,000. We just need to try and avoid that, the disqualification. Maybe just stay off Mercedes. Maybe there's a thing there. Mercedes and Kota, Mercedes and Spa. Like, just stay away from them. They can't get it right. Misjudging some calculations maybe, but
Yeah, no, it's tough because, they are right now probably one of the more consistent assets going
yeah,
around. So I think it, for me, would be foolish to completely abandon ship on all three Silver Arrow. Well, I've got two at the moment, but abandon ship at least on one of them.
yeah,
But I think just trying to stick to my guns and make sure that I continue to make the best
yeah,
decisions. I think something post Belgium that I'm happy with is the current team structure. And I think for the last 3 or 4 races, I've been building towards double premium lineup. So, we
yeah.
have, I think, the same
Yeah, we
team
actually
right now with,
have identical teams, I think. Yeah,
Piastri, Russell, Sonoda, Hulkenberg, Sargent.
yeah, and then the McLaren and
Um,
Mercedes constructors. Yeah,
Yeah, so I'm really happy with that team structure. I think it strikes a nice balance between building budget and scoring points. And Zandvoort probably won't be that high of an overtake track. It may not be Budapest or Monaco levels, but last year was probably inflated a bit by that wet weather. So I'm happy with the structure of the team and going into this week or the next race, I should say. And that's kind of at least a positive to take away from the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's also the team structure that we share at the moment is, in my opinion, a good balance between points potential and budget gain. I'll be interested to hear your kind of take on the kind of budget versus points, because it's been quite a hot topic throughout the season, to be honest. In seasons bygone, I would say I've been much more focused on just points, 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 and maybe that's the way to play it. I don't know. But I think this season, because it's much more open, and we know the algorithm of the whole A tier, B tier, C tier drivers. What is your take on budget versus points? How are you trying to balance that? How much does it come into your thinking?
Yeah, look, I think it's easy to get caught up on a lineup that is perfectly budget building focused. And I think the strategy earlier in the season when, Aston Martin and Lance Stroll and other assets were at better value price points made a case more compelling. But I think now the allure of running even one CT constructor will just never enter into my thought process. I do believe that there is some reason to go with those more reliable midfield drivers like the Hasses and maybe Sonoda, maybe an Alpine, but their reliability history isn't the most perfect. And then sticking to, the consistent constructors, because Mercedes and McLaren have delivered, and I'm not really drawn to Red Bull because of Perez's concerns, and if looks like he's now in the seat for the rest of the season, so just another reason for me to avoid it. And then Ferrari are kind of hit and miss. So I think just kind of sticking to those reliable B tier assets in McLaren, in Mercedes, and then McLaren are obviously very good, and we've got Hulkenberg and Sonoda, so I think they're quite good. It's making the best and of those value budget assets or value assets at different price points. But I do think points and budget building is kind of the perfect balance, which we have now. I don't think you should only take points or you should only take budget, because end of season, right, when we don't, like, having an extra $1 million or $2 million will probably make the difference when it comes to using the 3X.
Yeah, for sure. The 3X is definitely a chip that's, well, it's going to be used soon, to be honest. It's going to be used soon, most likely on one of those sprints, but it's going to come up soon. And yeah, the more budget we can have in preparation for that, the better, for definite. We don't want to compromise on the rest of our teams. No. Just want to move on slightly and just kind of have a quick discussion about a bit more in depth in terms of you as a content creator, and then we'll move into kind of the quiz section, or lighten the mood a little bit and get everyone's brains ticking. But I just want to touch on you as a content creator first of all, and think about why first of all F1 fantasy, why not some other fantasy games specific to F1, and also what drew you into the content creation? Why not just let someone else deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and I honestly ask myself that question every so often too. But I think for me, what drew me into F1 was, I've been a fan of the sport for probably 8-9 years, and I will say that Drive to Survive made me take more of a vested interest in the sport. I think living back in Australia years ago, Ricciardo was kind of at the forefront of Formula One when he was successful at Red Bull. But I think, understanding a bit more about the driver landscape through the Netflix series got me more into it. And I still have played many a fantasy sport over the years, Fantasy Premier League, one of them, which I think's very much the benchmark and shares a lot of similarities with F1. I'd even argue that maybe the F1 developers have kind of taken a few of the good features of Fantasy Premier League to mirror or make this game. But I followed a number of creators on Twitter and on YouTube for my team then, and it just seemed, not that I was ever entertaining it, but F1 just seemed like it was really lacking that, that presence. And I think, you, Adam at F1 Fantasy HQ, myself, and others kind of moved in the last kind of 12, 24 months. And I've definitely noticed in the last year that there've probably been even more people entering the fray, and I think that's a really great thing. I wouldn't ever call myself a content creator, but I do enjoy making the videos, and I do love engaging with people because it makes me want to come back for more, right?
That tagline, I've thought about it myself. It's very kind of generic term, content creator, and I use that term just because it's kind of the general term, but yeah, I don't really see myself as a content creator either. But when you think about it, I am creating content, so yeah, I guess I guess so. But yeah, like for me personally, it's the same sort of thing. Like really been into F1 for quite a while and wanted to get more into F1 fantasy. And when I looked on YouTube, 3 years ago, I was like, there's hardly anyone talking about it. And that's what I was just like, well, if no one else is going to do it, I'll do it myself then. So that's kind of where it all started for me. I'm just like, right, let's do this. But no, didn't expect to necessarily be doing it 2.5 years later. But yeah, thoroughly enjoying it and seeing where it takes me. So yeah, all good.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been good. I've definitely got no plans to stop doing it anytime soon.
Just want to ask you a little bit because you've done some interviewing yourself over on the Fan Amp channel. You've had some big guests on there. You've had the likes of Laura Winter, Alex Brundle, and Chris McCarthy over there. This is my first time doing any sort of interviewing thing, so you are the person with experience here. Like, can you explain like how that felt? Did it feel kind of surreal talking to those guys? After watching them on TV for a lot of the time, these guys are technically famous, I guess. So yeah, how did that feel?
I mean, mate, I will say you're a natural so far, so I wouldn't get too caught up in that. But yeah, no, it was an awesome experience. Chatting to Laura, Alex, and Chris. They're all really well established, and we see their faces and hear their voices every race weekend. So yeah, I think just getting an insight into kind of what they do and how they cracked the Formula One sport and got that big break was really interesting to me. And they're all from very different backgrounds because Laura, for example, covered other sports before she got into Formula One. Chris McCarthy, he said he started at commentating go-karts, or I think amateur racing. And Alex is from a motorsport background. Obviously, we know his dad does the grid walk and Sky Sports. So all were very different. All were really interesting folks, and they're all F1 fantasy players as well. And Adam from F1 Fantasy HQ, he does his weekly wrap up of their leagues, and they've all shown an interest in those posts. So we're very happy to jump on and have a chat. And I definitely think there's hopefully more interest from some of the other pundits down the line because it has been surprisingly well received from some of those experts.
Yeah. Do you think you'll ever hit the jackpot and get like one of the drivers on?
No.
Do you reckon any of the drivers actually play F1 Fantasy? Do you reckon they're putting the 2 times on themselves? Do you reckon that happens?
I doubt it, but I do remember when I think Zhou was doing a promotional piece for the Chinese Grand Prix. He was interviewed by Stake or someone in Formula One asking for his fantasy team, and
yeah.
It was no disrespect to Zhou, but the team was dreadful. So I think he just stacked it with drivers, and the budget, I think, would have meant his constructors would have been like Sauber and Haas. But yeah, look, the day a Formula One driver picks up F1 Fantasy competitively is the day we've got our work cut out for us.
Yeah, and especially if that does happen as well, then I'm sure that would increase the popularity of the game like massively. If they just put one tweet out saying here's my team, can you imagine? Like, yeah, it'd be great for the game. Watch this space. My next interview with Charles Leclerc. Right, so can you just before we move on to the quiz, just give us a little bit of a feeling about the sort of content that you put out yourself? Because I'm sure most of my viewers would have also been in and about your channel or on Twitter and that, and a lot of them are familiar with you already. But anyone that's not already subscribed, etc., can you just give us a brief kind of outline what sort of content you do?
Yeah. So as Tom mentioned at the start, from F1 Fantasy Hub on Twitter/X and YouTube, they're the 2 main forms of content. I do video and brief written on Twitter, and weekly my videos are usually 2 parts. The first being an early team selection a couple of days after we have the race and get to digest everything that's happened. I am dreading the Belgian Grand Prix team selection video I put out in a couple of weeks because it's got nothing positive to say about it. And then later in the week will be my preview and final thoughts video. So kind of recapping all the news and headlines, upgrades, kind of key talking points that have come up on Twitter, and maybe if it's time for a chip, we'll go into that, and then final team thoughts at the end. So it's, a very kind of rinse and repeat, but 2 videos a week, and then over on FanAmp, as you said, the fantasy formula with Adam, we do a deadline stream and a pre-recorded show every week too. So quite a bit of video content, but I do enjoy it, and it certainly means there's a lot of questions flying around that I'm happy to engage in and provide my thoughts on.
Excellent. Right, well, I guess in that case, should we move on to the quiz?
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Are you ready for this? I haven't given Rob any like insight into this at all. It's just like, there will be a quiz. Have fun. Let's do it.
I don't know what to expect, but let's see.
Yeah, so it's just going to be, again, kind of keeping the kind of relaxed vibe going here. If you're watching this on your phone or whatever computer, feel free to like hit the pause as the questions roll out. See if you can beat Rob. Post your final scores down the bottom. I'm not going to set a timer or anything here. We're not going to make it too pressured. Let's just roll out some questions, see where we're at. Are you ready to go, Rob, with this?
Yeah, I've done absolutely no homework, so I have no idea how I'm going to go, but I'm very much excited.
Okay, so yeah, let's get started then. I think we've got about 12 questions or so to get through here, so let's get started with some nice sort of kind of simple questions to get started. First question is, who is the current highest owned driver in F1 Fantasy?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I think it's either Max or Alex Albon. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the zombie teams had these 2 guys at the start of the season. The ownership, I think, for both have dropped, but I can't remember who it was that mentioned this the other week. I think it's Alex Albon, so I'm going to say Albon. He's around the 40s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, it is indeed Alex Albon as the highest owned driver. I'll give you a bonus point if you can catch that percentage.
I'm pretty sure it's in the 40s, so let's say 44.
Oh, not bad. It's actually 48%. So
okay,
it's 48%. Kind of interesting that the highest owned asset is actually still only owned by less than half teams total. But that kind of goes to show the kind of variety in teams for me. But there we go.
I think it's probably like the zombie teams as well that have RB as their constructor and Verstappen, who's not really the popular pick either. So
yeah, most likely.
Interesting to see if that changes.
Yeah. Right, following on from that, who's the lowest owned driver? And again, bonus point for percentage.
Okay, so I did look at this a couple of weeks ago, and it was either Sergio Perez or George Russell. I wonder if Russell's ownership has creeped up just a little bit because of his recent form. So let's lock in Perez.
Excellent choice. I love the thought process here. You can see why you're good at doing all the information on the videos, because you're working things out. It is indeed Perez again. Can you hazard a guess to the percentage there?
It was single digits again a couple of weeks ago when I looked, so I'm going to say like 8. I think it was high single digits.
So close. It's 9% currently as of the time of recording. It might well be 8% in a couple of weeks' time, though, as people continue to drop off him.
Like a man. Might buy a few at Res.
Right, let's move on then. So, who has increased in value the most this season? And again, I'm the generous overlord here. I will give you bonus point for how much money he has increased by.
And I will caveat, I've got nothing on my other screen, so because I clearly didn't get the
no cheating at home either. No cheating at home.
No. I think it should be K-Mag.
Is that your final answer? Locking it in?
Yeah.
Excellent choice. It is indeed K-Mag, the Overtake King. Any ideas or sort of a rough guess of how much he's gone up? This is obviously a net increase, so it won't necessarily be in chunks of 0.5 or whatever he's gone up.
It's got to be 500,000 or a full million, because that's what the C tier assets go up. I'm gonna say we've had 14 races. Let's just say he's gone up in 10 of them. So let's say 5. Let's go 5.5. Just to be generous.
That is pretty much spot on. It is actually 5.6. It's not a clear 0.5 because he has dropped a couple of points in value. It accounts for the drop, but that's an extremely good guess. Look at this guy. He's 3 questions in and he's just nailing everything pretty much. Okay, let's see if we can catch him out. Let's see if we can catch him out of this one. So, Which drivers are currently first and second in the rankings for average points scored this season?
I actually think I do know the answer. I know Max is leading for average points scored, or I'm fairly certain he is.
Yeah.
It's a toss-up for me between Norris and Leclerc in the second spot. But I'm going to say Norris because Leclerc's looked dreadful since Monaco.
It is a very, very valid guess. However, I have put a little banana skin in this question, and the actual answer is Behrman on 26 points. I'm sorry. I thought that might catch a few people out. I'd love to know if anyone watching this actually would have guessed Behrman, because if the tables were turned and it was me answering that question, I never would have guessed him. But actually, yeah, because of his one race, he actually averages just fractionally more than Lando Norris. So yeah, the true answer obviously would be Verstappen and Norris, for sure. You were right there. But yeah,
No,
if we're splitting hairs, it's Behrman.
No, it is. No, that's the correct answer.
Okay. Right. How many drive of the days has Norris got this season?
Okay. It's either 6 or 7, but he hasn't won since Austria, which was a farce anyway, given he didn't finish the race. I'm going to say 7.
It's actually 6.
It
Six
is
times,
6, okay.
yeah, which in itself is kind of crazy, but goes to show what an important asset he's been over recent weeks with putting him in as a 2 times. Yeah, 6 drive of the days. Yeah. It's yeah, roughly what half the total races. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I guess kind of following on from that kind of drive of the day stat. Do you know who the only non-Ferrari McLaren driver is to get drive of the day this season?
Non-McLaren Ferrari should be Lewis Hamilton in Belgium.
Correct. Yep. Correct. Yep. Yeah. In fact, he's actually, I'm not sure where, I think it must have been Silverstone as well, because he's actually got 2 drive of the days this season. I want to say it was Silverstone drive of the day. I might be wrong, but yeah, he is the only non-Ferrari McLaren driver, which again is another kind of crazy stat, but also kind of shows kind of the fan base that these guys have. All right, we're about halfway through the quiz here. You're doing a great job.
I'm glad.
Who has the highest average positions gained this season?
Okay, that's tough. I could tell you overtakes. I could tell you overtakes. Positions gained. It has to be a C tier asset because they're obviously qualifying much lower. I want to say K-Mag, but I'm not sure that's the right answer. I think it might be Lance Stroll. But again, I feel like it's maybe not a stab in the dark. But for me, it's got to be one of Stroll, Zhou, or K-Mag. But it could be none of them. I'm going to go with Stroll. I may not be right, but I'm going to go with Stroll.
Okay, yep. It's a very good guess. It is actually one of the other 2 names you mentioned, though. It is actually Zhou. Okay. Only averaging 2.4 positions gained. So positions gained is a bit of a dry spot for points in general this season. Zhou consistently qualifying back in sort of P19, P20. Makes him the highest average positions gained across the grid, but it's still not very impressive, to be honest.
I think as well, like he's not doing anything in overtakes like he was last year, so he's not scoring the points to get those price increases that we thought he would, right?
He's almost like a necessary evil for a lot of people who just need him in the teams to stretch to higher upside drivers. But yeah, I'm very grateful that I moved him out going into Spa with yet another DNF. Right, moving on. Which constructor has the most fastest lap awards so far this season? Which constructor has the most fastest lap?
I thought you were going to say pit stop, but that's too easy. So, fastest lap. It's got to be one of the big 4. I don't know if it's Red Bull. I think it's... I get the feeling it could be Ferrari, but I'm kind of guessing. I don't know. It's got to be one of the 4, so I'm going to say Ferrari because that was my gut.
Yeah, legitimate guess. However, it's actually the Mercedes, interestingly.
Okay.
The Mercedes, with 4 fastest lap awards, which I believe is just one more than the likes of Ferrari, Red Bull. I think they're set on 3. But yeah, Mercedes doing well with those fastest laps, which they get
It's
those points as the constructor as well. So as Mercedes owners, that's some glimmer of hope for the future. Maybe if they can
yeah,
continue to get those fastest laps.
fascinating. It's not quite as important as driver of the day, but it's probably also harder to predict as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's a tough one, but I guess maybe it's to do. I don't know. This is just a pure guess. Maybe it's to do with them not necessarily been fighting at the front so much and having that kind of that gap between them and the people behind them, and they just get that kind of free stop for the softs or whatever. I don't know. I haven't really looked into it that far, but yeah, Mercedes leading the way at the moment.
Okay.
Right, moving on to the final few questions. This one is a bit of a weird question. In fact, it's kind of a backwards question. I'm going to give you the answer, and can you tell me what the question is?
I feel like Jeopardy.
So the answer is has, as in the constructor has,
Yeah.
156.
156. Constructor. I want to say total points scored because I can't think of anything else that they would have 156 in so far if we're talking fantasy metrics. Although it could be, actually, it could be overtakes. 'Cause we're 14 races in. And K-Mag averages about 5. Hulk's about 4. Let's say they're 156 overtakes for the season.
Spot on, absolutely spot on. That is in fact the question: which constructor has the highest number of overtakes this season, and how many? The answer is has, with 156, which is quite an astronomical figure. Yeah, I haven't got the stat on screen with me here at the moment, but I think the next closest is like 120, 130, something like that. So they're quite head and shoulders above everyone in terms of overtaking.
Huge.
Right. Testing your knowledge on the F1 Live Mini League. Don't know how up to date you are with Adam's updates. Who's currently leading the F1 Live Mini League, and maybe just a rough guess of how many points they have?
Okay, I know Laura is in first. I think she's ahead of me in the rankings. I actually don't know what my total points are, so I have no idea what she's on. Let's say 2850, just stab in the dark.
Okay, yeah, not bad. Laura Winter, of course, is actually leading the way. Bit closer to 2950. It's 2946. So yeah,
Okay.
I think I'm roughly 50 points ahead of her. So pretty tight up there. But I'm beating the F1 Live Mini League at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm well behind her and maybe even Chris McCarthy in second, so I've got a bit of work to do.
Yeah, plenty of time. Still got plenty of time. Right, final couple of questions then. Which driver asset, this is just kind of a random one, which driver asset is currently valued at 11.5 million?
Ooh,
I've picked this number because there are a few drivers in that region, so
There are.
we're really testing your photographic memory here. Do you remember who is 11.5 mil?
Oh, well, let's narrow it down to the ones that I can confidently say are in that range because I absolutely don't know. It's got to be one of Sonoda, Ocon, Magnussen. Don't think Hulk's anywhere close to 10, or he's not at 10. That leaves, or it could be Ricardo. I forgot about him. So I've got the two RBs. Ocon, I think Magnussen might actually be more than 11.5. Let's go Ricardo. Oh, yeah, let's go Ricardo.
Again, good deduction skills. Not quite right this time though. It's actually Ocon at 11.5.
Okay.
I think, again, I haven't got it on screen, but I think from what I remember, Ricardo's like 11.3, something like that, roughly.
Oh,
So
sure.
yeah, very good guess, very good educated guess there. But Ocon actually sits at 11.5 at the moment.
Okay.
Right, to wrap it up, another bit of a tricky question here. And again, it's kind of on its head, so I'm going to give you the answer. Let's see if you can work out what the question is. Just keeping you on your toes here. So the answer is Zhou 174 and Bottas 158.
Show 174 and Bottas 158.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a tough one.
What
It is a
in the-
tough one.
Yeah. I'm gonna.
It's a lot easier when you're making the questions when you know the answer.
Yeah, no, of course. No, of course. I'm just trying to think like if it's not something that they've been able to reach in one season? Is it maybe an aggregate of points over the last 2 or 3 seasons? Because I can't see Zhou scoring 174 of anything in this game. Although maybe was it what he scored last season? No, it doesn't sound right. Because 24 races, 170. No way, they couldn't have scored 174 points in fantasy because that's what a midfield driver scores. I'm gonna, again, random guess. I'm gonna say, I want to say their total fantasy points over the last 3 seasons, because I just can't think of anything else that lives up to that number in fantasy for those drivers. But let's just go with that. Their scores over the last 3 seasons.
I feel like I might have cheated you a little bit with this question, because maybe it doesn't quite qualify as F1 fantasy, because the actual answer is, and I have to say I did think of you when I came up with this question, was related to how much time they've spent in the pits this season. So the actual question would be, who are the 2 drivers that have spent the most time in the pits this season, and how many seconds have they been there? So Zhou's actually been in the pits for 174 seconds and Bottas for 158 seconds. And then just for comparison, I've pulled a couple of other drivers, Verstappen and Sainz, who have spent, Verstappen's been in the pits for 60 seconds this season, Sainz 56. So yeah, just kind of arcing back. Like I said, I thought of you cursing those pit stops earlier on this season, but it just maybe a bit of a trick question there. I'm sorry, but
no, that was a good one. I probably should have thought outside the fantasy box a little bit, but I do remember screaming to the fantasy gods to let them pit under 3 seconds in the first few races. But what can you do, right?
Yeah, I mean, thank God for current owners of Zhou and Bottas. They've seemed to have resolved those issues at long last, and they are getting, roughly 3 seconds or below now. Right, so Rob scored 6.5 when we've totted up all the totals. I do feel a little bit harsh on a couple of those questions there, but yeah, Rob scored what I think is an impressive, well thought out, deducted well, a lot of the questions there. 6.5, so if anyone watching this can beat Rob, let us know about it. Did anyone get all of them right? I'll be amazed, actually, especially those couple of banana skins I threw out there. But yeah, if you're watching the video and you took part in the quiz, please do let us know how you did, so maybe you can make Rob feel a bit better, or you can make him feel really bad when you tell him you've got like 10, 11. Right, well, thanks very much for joining in the quiz there, Rob. We'll finish off sort of the final few questions here that I wanted to touch on, because I think it's something that people will be interested in. So let's get stuck into the final section of the video. I'd like to start off with 3 things that you love about F1 fantasy, because at the end of the day, we're doing these videos week in, week out, all these people watching these videos, playing the game, like literally thousands and thousands of people doing this. Like, what is it that you love about this game that keeps bringing you back?
Yeah, I could go on all day about these things, but I'll keep it very short. I think the first thing has to be how much variation we have in the game in terms of team selection. I think F1 certainly aced the pricing compared to a year ago, and so there's just so much more variety. There's not necessarily a perfect template right now, and I think that's great. I think a second thing is that F1 Fantasy gives me much more of a reason to root for midfield teams than if I was otherwise going for just Piastri or Ferrari every week, which is where my alliances lie. So it means I can really egg on Tsunoda or Hulkenberg, for example, and hope they have a good finish in the midfield, other than just going for the best drivers in the teams I go for. And then I think, kind of similar to the first point I made, there's no perfect strategy. So I think, there's no perfect teams. I don't think there's a perfect strategy for deploying chips, as we saw in China and Miami with Limitless. I think there's certainly different circuits that give more weight to certain team structures. I think, Monaco favors those top heavy teams, and maybe those higher overtake tracks work in favor of the C-tier drivers. So I think there's a lot of different directions you can go, and I think that makes it a much more exciting game to play. Yeah,
definitely. It's certainly improved without really changing very much. They tweaked a couple of things at the end of last season, but I think it is probably more to do with the fact that the teams have kind of converge a little bit, particularly at the front of the grid, to make it much more variety than what we've seen for years, basically. So yeah, certainly agree with you on that. And also, yeah, the variety of tracks and that, and even looking at the next few tracks, we go from Zandvoort, high downforce, and we go straight into Monza, the complete opposite of a high downforce track. Not long after that, we got Singapore, which again swings it back. So you can't just like sit on a team and be suitable for every track. So yeah, I'm loving the variety and the forward thinking that we have to put into it. So the natural question to come off the back of that though is, can you name 3 things that you hate about F1 fantasy?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I and most of the community are quite allied on these, but I think the number one thing for me is how harsh the DNF penalty is. -20, I think, really can make a bad weekend worse. And so I would love to see it come back down to -10, which is, I think, what we had in 2022.
Yeah.
And negate some of the bitterness of having to swallow a pill like a DNF or multiple in your team. I'm fine with the DSQ penalty, the -25, because even though it was quite tough,
that's
in
bold.
Belgium,
Bold spoken from a manager of George Russell from Spa, but he's fine. He's fine with the disqualification 25.
Maybe 20, but I guess it is you're essentially driving an illegal car, right? So it's very different to not finishing the race.
My counterpoint to that, again, sorry to butt in though, like
of course.
What sort of player agency does that provide to us? How can we as managers account for a potential disqualification? You look at the likes of the DRS. I think it was DRS for the Hazes back in Monaco, which caused a disqualification through qualifying. Being 1.5 kilograms underweight. For me, getting punished as a manager for -25 disqualification on something that I have literally zero control about. There's no way you can even think about it really. For me personally, I think that's still too much of a high penalty when you also end up losing the points. I know it's exaggerated in George Russell's case because he's literally gone from the top to the rock bottom and beyond. For me personally, I'm not a fan at all of these big, heavy minus points.
I think they would do well to scale both of them down, just because I do think it has made this last week and other weeks very difficult to process. So let's see what they do next season, because it has been a bit of a pain point for F1 fantasy. The other thing I hate is driver of the day. I think get rid of it or make it 3 points, because 10 is more than what you would get finishing top 5 in fantasy, about the same. So it is something I'd like to see go. And you and I have talked about it endlessly on our channels as to why it monopolizes Lando Norris. And then I think the third thing, probably less of an issue for me, but I would like to see the game update the scores a little quicker. They've seemed to have gotten better a little bit the last few races or so, but earlier in the season, it took, I think, for a couple of races, Australia, I think, was 24, 48 hours for no reason. I know they've got to calculate how many overtakes drivers make and then the pit stop times, but that shouldn't take more than an hour to do. And, sometimes it can drag on for 6 or 7. So hopefully they can improve that next year as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I guess one thing, or maybe hate is a strong word, one thing I kind of dislike, or you may well disagree, is actually kind of the lack of point scoring opportunity for all the kind of C-tier guys. The fact that basically all their points come from positions gained and overtakes. It hasn't been so bad this season, in my opinion, but I think in general, giving them, rewarding drivers, if they can find a way to reward drivers that have an actual good race. For example, your Yuki Tsunodas of the world that kind of qualify 8-9, finish 8-9, that's really good for them in reality, but it's terrible for fantasy. If they can find a way to try and balance that, I really like that going forward. But easier said than done, I guess.
Agree. Yeah, I like that.
Right, so lots of fantasy managers listed and watching right now. Rob, you're an experienced fantasy manager. Have you got any top tips for the managers out there? Any advice you'd like to impart, kind of, general or specific?
I think most people that consume our content are rather engaged, so this is probably not news to any of them. But I think for me, playing other fantasy sports, biggest thing is consuming as much content as I think is helpful. And given that we're now starting to see a few more creators in the space, in YouTube and on Twitter, there is so much out there to obviously inform our decision making. And I feel as though it can sometimes overcomplicate our process of landing on the ideal team with how much information there is. So I find kind of streamlining my content to, a selection of YouTube creators, tweets, whatever the news source is you like to get your information from, makes it a lot easier with whittling down what I need to focus on that week. So I don't know, you might, or not you specifically, Tom, but whoever watching this might only think, or I might honestly mainly watch like 2 or 3 content creators, even though there's more than that out there. And at least it means there's not so many different directions you could be pulled in. I think the only other tip is, and I mean, I talk about this a lot myself, I mentioned it before, like just sticking to my strategy of what the priority is post FP2 when we have that information. Is 2x staying on my driver? Do I need to put out fires in my midfield driver lineup? Do I need to rebalance how my team is structured? And constructors, because of how expensive they are, I find that they have to be longer term holds. I just am not someone that will do a swing trade on Ferrari for 1 week and then move them back out the following week. So I try to prioritize my driver transfers and leave the constructors for those longer term plays.
Yeah, I just want to kind of touch on one thing you mentioned there about consuming content and I can't even say the word streamlining. Oh my God, that's such a tongue twister for me. One thing I want to kind of touch on that as well is actually, as much as for me personally, I do take in lots of information from other sources and that. It's also like being able to make up your own mind and having your own team at the end of the day, which is kind of funny coming from someone, a YouTuber or whatever you want to call me, content creator, whatever, preaching to make your own mind up. But I think it's important to make sure that it is your decision at the end of the day and kind of own that decision and not just kind of go with some random person that's tweeted something or just the latest YouTube video you've watched. Like, I think it's important to make sure that not to get kind of fuzzy and clouded by all the content that's out there, because there is plenty of content at the moment. But yeah, I think if I had to throw a tip in there, it'd be like, make sure you own your own decision at the end of the day.
Yep. Fully agree with that. It's I have no issues with people copying my teams if that's what they want to do, but at the end of the day, like you say, it's the decision you make. You're pressing the button. So it's just how it goes with fantasy, and I honestly have no issues with sharing as much as I can that can help other people inform their process of deciding what they want.
Excellent stuff. I guess kind of branching off from that as well, just kind of interested. Do you watch any other content creators? Do you have any particular tools or websites that you like to use, that you're happy to kind of share that knowledge with us? Like, what's your favorite thing to go to?
I mean, there's a laundry list of F1 fantasy creators on YouTube
there's a lot
now,
at the moment,
and
isn't there? Yeah.
I honestly say I watch all of them. I wouldn't say I watch every video from every YouTuber every week, but I've definitely subscribed to all of their channels. And I mean, I've subscribed to yours for as long as you've been on the air. So you're always definitely one of the first that shows up in my algorithm. And I definitely find that I have, depending on the week and the decision I need to make, will tune into one maybe more than another. But aside from YouTube, Twitter is an incredible forum for finding those snippets or nuggets of information that sometimes you may not come across. And then, we talked about F1 fantasy tools and how good they are for analyzing points projections each week. So they're probably the primary verticals. I'd say there's very few other outlets that I use. And if I do, it's kind of sparingly.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we'll back up the point that you said about lots of useful Twitter accounts. I find a lot of useful Twitter accounts that are posting all the data and everything, and looking at particularly practice data in terms of like long pace, long run pace, and who's fast through the high speed, who's fast through the low speed. Kind of just lots of completely non-fancy accounts, but we can use those accounts to kind of help build our knowledge for who's looking good for the weekend. I guess I kind of want to wrap up with, again, kind of branching off from that, is the future of F1 fantasy. What are your kind of thoughts on where the game is going? Are you happy with where it's going? And what are your kind of plans for the future? Do you have any plans for further expansion as you kind of burst onto YouTube just over a year ago? Do you know, what are your thoughts on F1 Fantasy as a game and for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in a much better place than it was a year ago. I fully expect it will get better each year it goes past. I think it's at around 2.3, 2.4 million teams at the moment, which I think is maybe just below where it was a year ago, but pretty similar. And I do expect it'll just continue to tick along. I don't think it will ever kind of explode into the same stratosphere that, say, English football or any American fantasy sport is, just because maybe the viewers aren't quite there yet. But I definitely think the community is more engaged than it ever has been, and it's just, as I've said, another reason for me to keep coming back every week and making videos. I think the idea of getting me on is onto your channel, Tom. Like, I'm honestly so honored to be with the OG YouTube fantasy creator, but I definitely would love to do something like this on my channel and have guests on like yourself and others, because I do think it adds another element to the discussion than me just rambling for 20, 30 minutes into a camera with no other kind of soundboard.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of the rambling into a camera for 20, 30 minutes. But yeah, it's been fantastic having you on. It's been really nice to chat to you, because it's been kind of odd that we've been kind of chatting a bit now and again on Twitter and that, but we've never actually spoken to each other until today, which is kind of funny. So it's been really, really fantastic having you on, and really insightful to kind of get into your head a little bit as a fantasy manager. And I'd like to get some feedback from any of the viewers that have watched this and sat through roughly an hour or so. I think it's taken. Just kind of get some feedback from any of my subscribers going forward for whether you like this content, if you want more people to come on. And of course, anyone that hasn't already, then please do go ahead and subscribe to Rob's channel, F1 Fantasy Hub, and follow him on Twitter if you've got an account. Rob, is there anything you'd like to kind of finish off with saying, or just want to say bye-bye and go have a lie down?
No, well, no, I just want to say again, thanks for having me on, Tom. I'm so glad we managed to put this together, because as two of the longer tenured F1 fantasy creators out there, it's nice to get together and talk rubbish about F1 fantasy for an hour.
Yeah, that's great. Well, hopefully we'll do it again at some point. I'm sure there'll be some people out there somewhere that will enjoy it. So I'd like to say just, yeah, again, thank you very much, Rob, for joining me. And thank you very much to all the viewers that have sat through again. Yeah, give me some feedback. Go subscribe to Rob, etc. And I'll see you back here on my channel ahead of the Zandvoort Grand Prix, which is coming up towards the end of August. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you again to Rob, and bye-bye for now, everyone.